climate scientists, the case for embracing higher levels of CO2. So, a recent report from Oxford Academics Bioscience warns that the Earth has entered quote unquote uncharted territory, and life is now under siege due to escalating concentrations of carbon dioxide. The authors emphasize the urgent need for a faster phase out of oil, coal, and fossil fuels to prevent water and food shortages, as well as extreme heat affecting a significant portion of the world's population. So, those findings there alone, before I continue on with this article, ridiculous. Because you phase out oil, coal, and fossil fuels, you're immediately going to have water and food shortages.
Everyone's gonna die.
So,
Sorry, that's what happens.
so phasing those out to prevent water and food shortages, just ridiculous concept on its own. And then, as well as extreme heating affecting a significant portion of the world's population. Extreme cold affects 10 times more people than extreme heat does. Extreme heat is not to say that it's not a problem, but cold is way worse. Way more people die.
Yeah, I
from
wish people
cold.
would look into these statistics on the number of deaths that happen based on cold weather versus warm weather every year.
Even
I
in
wish they would
India.
look. Yeah, like people do not pay enough attention to that because it's not highlighted. But your number at 10x is about bang on.
Yeah, well, there was a good point about why that might be in, I believe it was Unsettled. It might have been False Alarm, those books, but they were saying about how cold typically kills people over the span of weeks. Heat can kill them through dehydration within a matter of days.
I looked at these figures from like 5-10 years ago on a government website.
Yeah.
And it was the numbers were mirrored. They were pretty much, you said, they're basically 10x. So if you do some research from credible sources, it's pretty significant.
Yeah.
And people just are not aware of it. They're not. It's just I get it. I understand that there's this alarmism and there's this paying attention to the media and all these things they're throwing at you. But yeah, sorry, go on.
Anyways, yeah. So, however, not all scientists share this perspective. Patrick Moore, chairman and chief scientist of EcoSense Environmental and co-founder of Greenpeace, dismisses climate change as a quote-unquote total scam, arguing that there's no scientific evidence linking CO2 to climate change over the decades. Moore contends that the climate message has shifted from global cooling to global warming and now disastrous weather, and challenges the assertion that CO2 is the primary cause of extreme weather events. Climatologist John Christie points out that weather-related deaths and climate disasters have significantly decreased over the years, challenging the narrative that CO2 is causing more intense and frequent extremes. So, to touch on that, couple things here. If we are to believe that CO2 is the driver of the warming of the climate, it makes zero sense that the climate cooled from the periods of 1940 to 1970, which were also one of the most rapid developments in industrialization in human history, if not the most. So it doesn't add up that its exact correlation between CO2 emissions and higher temperatures. And then on the other aspect of climate disasters, it's not just that they've significantly decreased, it's that they've almost gone non-existent. Like over 100 years, the climate or deaths due to extreme weather events have dropped by 96%. We're talking about from 500,000 people a year, and that's also when the population was a lot lower.
Right.
To nowadays, it's roughly 20,000 people a year.
Right. So one thing I would have to highlight there is our technology to be able to forecast incoming storms and stuff like that is improved substantially. Like we do hurricane watch every year. We know when shit is going to hit the fan.
For sure.
So people can be more prepared, and we have better technology, better, safer homes, all these other things. We have better protocols, better healthcare. So, I mean, even if you take all the things I just said and say that the number of deaths is square by the differences of a technology, still not a huge, like, it still doesn't add up to what they're saying, right?
Yeah. But look, adaptation is a massive part about our strength as humans.
Sure.
That is the number one strength that we as humans have, which is we adapt to our environment like crazy.
Yeah.
Think about it. You've got people living way up there in Nunavut, essentially in ice for their entire lives. And then you've got people in sub-Saharan Africa living in dry-ass deserts for their entire life.
For sure.
Like, we're extremely adaptable to our scenario. But it's like, look, if there's if there's a problem like weather events, it doesn't mean that weather events themselves have become non-existent. It's that the threat they pose is way lower than we would ever have throughout human history.
Right. What would be what? Do you know what the number of extreme weather events though is by volume in comparison?
So I don't know about the exact number. However, I can quote the IPCC reports. They're the AR5 reports, which again, the IPCC is the International Panel on Climate Change, which is the division that's tasked by the UN to do all of this science. Even them themselves have said in those documents that there has been no, they have low confidence, which means there's less than a 10% likelihood
Yep.
that there is a trend in droughts, floods, or hurricanes.
Okay.
So
They basically have no idea.
They're sitting there going, look, we're dealing with the best that we can throughout human history of
Yep.
trying to figure out what this stuff
But they
looks
have
like.
no
But
idea.
we
No, they have no
don't
clue.
have confidence.
It's just basically it's smoke and mirrors
Yeah.
essentially. I mean, one of the things I would say that I don't think we do enough is let's pay attention to who we're listening to. The guy that founded Greenpeace. I'm not sure about his education, but obviously he spent his whole life in this space. You know, you have these climatologists. You have people that do this for a living. They have the education in it, and they're raising red flags. So, you know, are they right? Are they wrong? I think you need to put more weight on people's opinions that have the education and have the experience. And I think I said this last podcast. If this is even half as bad as the media presents to us, why don't they just show us unequivocal evidence that proves that it's that bad? Because then all these people that are saying this stuff, they'll just be proved wrong. And then people like you and I can get on the right side, in quotes, of the issue. But without any of that proof, it just makes them seem like they're full of shit pushing this media campaign, which more than likely seems to be the truth.
Yeah. And what's crazy is there was actually a while back, Rogan did back-to-back episodes of somebody, Steve Koonin, which is one of the authors of the books that I've mentioned on this podcast before, called Unsettled, where he breaks down all of these reports, the IPCC reports. And then he brought on, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was a professor at the University of Texas, and he was very alarmist about climate change. He was saying that climate change is 100% humans' faults. But then Rogan asked him at one point during the interview, he said, okay, have you listened to the podcast I did with Steve the other day? And he said, yep, I listened. And he goes, what did he say in there that was wrong? What did he say in that podcast that was false? The guy said, so everything he said was true. And I can't refute any of the things that he said, but it's just, I think he's only telling one side of the story, which may be, but the very fact that you look at somebody that sits there and like unapologetically is like, this is all bullshit.
Yeah.
And then you say, I can't refute anything he said in that podcast.
There goes your argument.
What are we doing?
That's what I mean. Yeah. There doesn't seem to be a lot of strong support showing that this is going to be a significant impact for humans. There just isn't. You know what I mean? They just continue to highlight this information, and I think they just continue to use the media as their weapon of choice to basically use it as a tool of suppression, a tool of taxation, a tool of control. And I don't see this going away anytime soon because they don't have a COVID or something similar to keep us in line. So,
and you know, this goes back to something a great thought, which is I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. And that is what a lot of this narrative is all about. And I'm not sitting here saying I have the unequivocal answers to this whole problem or anything, but I'm sitting here just going like, I don't know what to believe, but it looks like you guys are lying.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, to get to the bottom of this, you have to have rigorous debate. You have to be able to ask the questions. You have to be able to look at actual science. You want to be able to look at data and compare it to maybe the guy on the other side of the aisle. Be like, okay, well, what do you have that I don't have? Why are you seeing this in a particular way, and why are you seeing it another? And like you said, you're looking at the IPCC, and they're like, well, we're not really less than 10% likely that there's any correlation here. That's really flawed data. Like anything they have on their side seems to be easy to break down, easy to disprove. And anyone on the side saying, hey, you guys are being alarmist about this and it's not that serious, There's nothing to refute.
Yeah.
So what are we doing here? I don't understand. The only thing is, like you
We're
said,
participating in stupidity.
well, it's a fucking charade again. Like I've been using this word a lot lately. It's just this charade where you can't ask questions. It's like an incendiary topic that if you ask a question, you're an idiot, you're a bigot, you're a whatever it is, you're a conspiracy theorist. Look, I don't think that's the case. I'm all for saving humanity, whatever that means. But right now, this whole climate agenda seems to be politically charged, and honestly, nothing else.